We tackled the wide receiver position already. Now we're tackling the running back position, going through our top 36 or so dynasty running backs post, week one of free agency, getting closer to the NFL draft, post combine. We have rookies included here. So we'll talk about kind of the cases for some of these rookies. I believe both of my top 10 and your top 10 rookie running backs made our top 36 overall dynasty rankings. So we'll have some rookie talk. We'll have some veteran talk. And of course, as you guys can see on the left side there, we'll talk about what these guys would cost in a trade, startup value, all that good stuff. So first tier running backs, everybody should probably expect the same three names. Maybe one of these is a surprise to you if you guys are just kind of checking back in with the dynasty landscape. Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs in some order. I have Bijan number one. I think many people have Jahmyr Gibbs number one in dynasty running back rankings right now. And then Ashton Jeanty, the upcoming rookie who's expected to be, his floor is 10 at Chicago at this point in terms of the NFL draft capital he's going to see. I don't even think he's going to make it to 12 to Dallas anymore. That was once thought to be the thing. But these guys are the top tier. These are the creme de la creme in dynasty fantasy football.
And you mentioned like some people might have Gibbs, some people might have Bijan. I actually do have Jeanty as my number one. The reason being, of course, I do think he's that generational talent along with what we saw from Bijan Robinson as a prospect. Obviously, it's a little bit more of a reroll because he's a little bit younger. And I do think that the possible landing spots in the top 10, whether it's Chicago, whether it's the Raiders, whether a team gets aggressive and makes a move for him, would either indicate that it's a very good situation or they have a ton of capital invested into him. So I do have Jeanty at number one. We did see, of course, last year, the receiving production that he had. And then obviously this past season, he was able to even develop into what ended up being the second most rushing yards of all time in FBS football, only behind Barry Sanders. So it's pretty simple. I don't really have to explain much more about Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, and I'll explain my rationale because I do have him at 3 of this group.
Yeah, which is
the
fair.
reason I have him at 3 is because Bijan and Gibbs, to me, are the two best running backs from a redraft standpoint, are both good enough running backs to receive second contracts with their current team. And both of them as 2023 first-round picks have, 3 more years of team control under their belt. So it's not like we're talking about like Breece Hall, for example, who was a second-round pick in 2022, where he only has 1 more year left on his rookie deal, and we got to start worrying about contract stuff. I feel like Bijan and Gibbs are at the perfect spot where I still feel very, very comfortable that they have a number of years of team control. So to me, I get the re-roll aspect of it. It's kind of like the Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, and CeeDee Lamb tier versus the Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors conversation where, like Jeanty's going to be a first-round redraft pick as well after he goes 6 to the Raiders or 10 to the Bears or whatever. But I'm going to, on the 95% chance that there's a slight better advantage that you get year 1 and 2 out of Bijan and Gibbs, that's why I would take those guys slightly ahead.
Yeah. And I think that's a fair comparison to make. The one thing I will push back is the running back market is very sensitive in terms of age. So again, I'm not saying that, these guys are 23 years old, they're aging. No, that's not necessarily what I'm saying. But wide receivers, we typically see get favor on the market. For example, you mentioned the Lamb, the Jefferson, the Chase tier. Those guys are all 25, 26 years old. Running back hits 25, 26 years old. He not only isn't in this tier, but I mean, we can even look at the next tier. There's only one running back in that tier that is over 26 years old.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that next tier, we have Devon Achane, Breece Hall, Saquon Barkley, Amarian Hampton, Bucky Irving, and Quinshon Judkins. Again, any which order you guys want to rank these guys, that's totally fine. If you think Saquon's just that dude and you want to put him at number 1 in this tier, that's totally fine with us. My thought process is that Devon Achane, Saquon Barkley, Breece Hall are all going to be high-level redraft picks, but Breece Hall and Devon Achane are a lot younger than Saquon Barkley. We do have to worry a little bit about what happens if Saquon deals with an injury, what happens to his market value, and all that kind of stuff. Again, I'm not going to be that stupid moron that goes, no running back, whoever finishes RB1 finishes as RB1 the next year. It's such a stupid take, but here's the thing with Saquon. He is up there in age. He is 28 years old. He has 1,500, 2,000 almost career touches under his belt. It factors into how you want to rank him. I have him at RB5. Anybody who has him at RB3 or something like that, I wouldn't really blame you.
So I actually have him at RB7. And that's no ill will towards Saquon. Obviously, he had a fantastic year. He got that extension. My concern, of course, would be a little bit with the age, but also, I mean, that's just how much I love Amarian Hampton. Amarian Hampton is my number 5 overall after Devon Achane, who's at 4. I have Amarian Hampton over Breece Hall and Saquon Barkley. The reason being with Amarian Hampton, he graded out as the RB2 for me in this class. There are rumblings that is he going to get top 25 capital? Is he going to get top 20, maybe even sneak into the top 15? It does sound like at this point, based off what we've been hearing from the NFL media, that he can come off the board as early as even number 12 to the Cowboys, number 10 to the Bears if they miss out on Ashton Genty. And if he gets first round capital, like you said, tethered to that contract, like a Gibbs, like a Bijan Robinson, I also think he's the type of talent, the type of athlete that can take 300 plus touches any given year. So I have him at 5 because, like I said, he's young and you're getting that re-roll into the potential 5-year contract.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far to put him over Breece and Barkley, but I do get the rumblings. Like DJ talked about where he could see Hampton going. First of all, he said it's a foregone conclusion he's going in the first round. Like he's going to go in the first round, basically is what he said. He asked Bucky Brooks and Rhett Lewis on the Move the Sticks podcast, hey, what percentage chance would you put that 2 of these guys go in the top 10? As in the Raiders take Genty at 6 and the Bears take Hampton at 10, presumably. And he was like, I think it's almost a greater than 50% chance that it happens. And that shocked me. I was like, I don't think Hampton in the Dynasty community is thought to be a top 15, 10 to the Bears, 12 to the Cowboys type of asset.
Yeah, I know a YouTube channel that maybe goes off a nickname that has 3 letters had Omar and Hampton going to the Bears in the first round in their recent mock. I don't know. Can you put a finger on that?
Yeah, that was us, but we did have them trading down to 13 in the process. But yeah, I get with Hampton, you're pretty much locked into first round draft capital. Obviously, 6 foot, 220, elite athlete, catches the football, great profile. We've talked about him, and we will have probably starting at the beginning of April, tail the tapes and film breakdowns on the site as well. So if you guys want to check those out, obviously site subscribers will be the film breakdowns, and then the tail of the tapes will be free to you guys on YouTube. Bucky Irving is also in this tier for us. We should probably have the conversation because I've seen people bring up the fact that is Bucky Irving a sell in Dynasty right now? Because he's an undersized running back. He had a great season. The Buccaneers were first in the NFL in third down conversion rate, one of the top 5 offenses in the league. Maybe Liam Cohen leaving will factor into Bucky Irving's workload, or Rachaad White's still there. Like there's Sean Tucker showed some signs. What are your thoughts on like generally buy, sell, hold right now on Bucky Irving? What would you do if you had him?
I mean, I'm not buying him on the open market because I personally just view that I missed my window on him. If I wanted to buy him, I could have bought him in season at the very latest. If not, I could have even bought him once Rachaad White started to show those injury issues in the middle portion of the year. I think at this point, it would have to be a hold or a sell. I'm perfectly content holding because we did see one of the most efficient rookie running backs of all time, 5.42 yards per carry, 8 rushing touchdowns, commanded 52 targets, and what was basically a split backfield until the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year. Last 5 or 6 weeks, I feel like the Bucs really realized, okay, Bucky Irving is our RB1. We're going to feed him touches. After the bye week, we see 18 opportunities, 28 opportunities. He got hurt against the Raiders, so I'm not really going to count that one. The next game on 44% of the snaps against the Chargers, he had 17. Against Dallas, 19, 24 in his final game. So there's evidence to say that Tampa may view him as a full-fledged RB1. The question that I have, though, is with Grizzard coming in, does he maybe want to add another young running back to this backfield?
Yeah, I think there's a great example of what happens in your second year when you're an efficient rookie in this tier with Devon Achane at the beginning of this tier. And Achane had a major uptick in his workload with Raheem Mostert it did take Raheem Mostert going down in week 1 and being injured pretty much for the rest of the year.
Miami did add a rookie running back too, like Tampa might.
Exactly. So there's a lot to be said with Bucky Irving as potentially a sell because, he had such a great close to the season, but then you can also argue, oh, maybe he's the next Devon Achane, or you look back at like Alvin Kamara's rookie season, what happened to him as a second-year player. There's a lot of great things that you can look at with Bucky Irving. I tend to lean as a Buccaneers fan towards they're going to cap this guy out at like 250 touches. They're probably not going to give him a full status workload because White's a good pass catcher. White's a better pass protector. He showed signs as a runner that he was going to improve a little bit. He's going to be involved. Sean Tucker might get 5-6 touches a game as well. So they're going to be a run heavy-ish offense. They're still going to pass the ball like crazy, but the absence of Liam Cohen and the fact that Bucky Irving's a little undersized and on the up right now kind of leans me towards, if you have him, maybe see if you can shop him for like a high-end first-round pick in this year's class. Somebody's willing to give you 102 or 103 or something like that for him. Like that's what his going rate is on the open market right now.
Yeah, I mean, if I can re-roll into like an Amar and Hampton, knowing that I can get that first-round tether with that big body for the potential workload going forward, I would do that. But again, if it's like, somebody's like, I'm not really good, I'll offer you 108 and a 208. Like if it's that, probably not. But if it's like, you can get like a top 3, top 4 overall pick, that's when you have to start considering it.
Yeah, for sure. I think he belongs to be ranked. Where do I have him ranked? RB7 or RB8 in dynasty rankings. And
I have
again,
him at 8.
that's including Genty being ahead of him and stuff.
And
So
Omar for me.
yeah, and Hampton and Judkins for me are one spot behind him. But now that you mention it, I probably would maybe take those guys depending on their draft capital and their landing spot. Judkins is also in this tier, mainly because, I mean, the way that I have these guys ranked in our draft guide is that Judkins is my RB2 and Hampton is your RB2.
Yeah.
But I have specifically these guys ranked like a mini tier ahead of Henderson and Caleb Johnson, who we'll talk about in a second, into the next tier. So with Judkins, the way he tested, the way he performed at Ole Miss, the way he performed at Ohio State, he kind of showed he can do everything. I expect him to be off the board. And Jeremiah said this too. The Bears have pick 39 and 41 or something in the second round.
2 second rounders, because I believe they have the Panthers second rounder, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the nugget that I took away from him talking about this was Rhett or somebody on the podcast said, hey, what if they just waited till the second round to draft their running back? And he said Judkins and Travion might not be there by their second round pick. As in they're going to go top 35 in the NFL draft, which wouldn't shock me one bit, given how Judkins tested, given how Henderson affects the passing game and the explosive plays that he brings to the table. I think once we get draft capital and landing spots from these guys, it will be a probably consensus take that they're top 12 dynasty running backs, just because you rarely see guys who have great profiles, get good draft capital, test really well, and you got to re-roll onto their rookie contracts. They're all 21, 22 years old.
Yeah, so I have Judkins at 10 overall, and I do think it is the right play aggressively ranking these rookies. For example, again, we'll talk about in the next year in a second. I have Caleb Johnson as my 9 overall, Travion Henderson as my 11 overall. We do have a ton of rookies mixed into this equation. Like you said, 10 of our top 36 ends up being on this rookie class. I mean, I think that kind of shows both what the running back market is at this current point, as well as just how strong this class is. It's a mix of both. It's not overwhelmingly one or the other. I think in conjunction, that's how you get to a 10 out of 36 split.
Yeah, and we needed this for what it's worth.
Yes.
Without these rookies in this ranking, you're ranking old Derrick Henry types as RB15 in Dynasty. Without these rookies, we're talking about older running backs getting ranked really, really high, or guys who are really questionable workload-wise being ranked probably higher than they should. The last guy we didn't really talk about in this tier was Breece Hall. I think we should probably have a conversation about him right now, because to me, if I'm a competitive team right now, he stands out as probably the single best dynasty buy of any position, legitimately, not just running back. I think he is one of the best buys overall in dynasty. And I can't really point anybody. Concerns. Yeah, I'm sure people do. Justin Fields comes in. He's going to, maybe impact the offense. He might not check down the ball. Yeah, it might not check down the ball as much as Breece Hall's been used to. He's been a top 5 running back in receiving targets per game at the position. In 2023, he actually led the position in targets. Last year, I believe he was 4th or 5th. So he's been a target monster. My thought process is this, though, on Breece Hall. He finished as a top 5 back 1 year removed from a torn ACL with Zach Wilson, Tim Boyle as his quarterbacks, and he had no offensive line in 2023. We would have said going into the year that he might be the best running back in the league.
I drafted him in the block league.
He is that good. He to me, I think he can overcome things, and I think Justin Fields will throw him the ball because they have no receivers other than Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, it's a little bit concerning because we saw at times last year that Braylon Allen was mixed in a little too much for our liking. Isaiah Davis was mixed in a little too much for our liking. Obviously, we're concerned now that how does the receiving aspect look with Justin Fields as opposed to Aaron Rodgers there? I mean, Aaron Rodgers, a quarterback 1 year removed off of an Achilles snap versus Justin Fields, who's probably going to average 10 design carries a game. So there is a difference, in my opinion, in terms of the receiving volume we could expect from Breece Hall. And I'm curious to see how is his touchdown equity implemented, because he hasn't been a guy that's been scoring a ton of touchdowns, 9 touchdowns in 2023, 8 touchdowns in 2024. Is that something that maybe goes up with the efficiency of the ground game? Obviously, the Justin Fields factor, maybe he sees later boxes. I feel like you can argue it in multiple frames. The only issue that I have is the overall base of the offense. I don't think is going to average as many points per game as it did with Aaron Rodgers, because I do think that's a projection for Fields.
Of course, yeah. Here's my thing, though. You had Aaron Rodgers, obviously better quarterback than Justin Fields specifically as a passer, but you also had Nathaniel Hackett calling the plays, and just so much disarray, lack of continuity on the offensive line, tons of new pieces that they brought in before the season last year. I think that Aaron Glenn will bring a kind of breath of fresh air to this team. And the scheme that they bring in too constantly runs the ball in the red zone, constantly fed David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs pass game targets, red zone opportunities. Like I think they just love the run game. And that's why I think Breece Hall, like I think Garrett Wilson is a significantly bigger loser of the Justin Fields edition than Breece Hall is personally.
Yeah, I mean, I think both are affected, but yeah, I would definitely agree with that because I mean, Garrett Wilson is literally relying upon an inaccurate quarterback throwing him the ball now. So,
Yeah. And
yeah,
even people, you can argue that, it's a little bit overrated for Garrett Wilson as well because Justin Fields fed DJ Moore the ball when he was in Chicago.
DJ Moore needed otherworldly efficiency to finish as a wide receiver one. So I would be concerned about Garrett Wilson. In fact, I mean, I was actually talking about you prior to us recording this that I actually moved Garrett Wilson in a big time dynasty trade last night.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's move us up here just so everyone can see. Let's get into the next tier of players here. We got one mid to late first rounder tier, as in that's what we would pay for them on the open market. That's about what they're worth. We do have more rookies. Caleb Johnson, Travion Henderson find themselves into this tier. And then we talked about this before we started recording. I could see any one of these guys getting nuked, these veterans, or I could see all of them being just solid RB1, maybe high-end RB2s in fantasy next year. Chase Brown, Jonathan Taylor, Josh Jacobs, James Cook, Kyron Williams, Chuba Hubbard, Christian McCaffrey. Of course, Christian McCaffrey, probably the best fantasy running back in NFL history, is just older and coming off of injury, and the 49ers are in dire straits here. So of these guys, who's the most likely to have competition added? Who's the least likely to have competition added? And then we'll talk about the rookies after.
Most likely, I would probably say it has to be Kyron Williams, based off what we've been hearing from Sean McVay, saying that they want a Bucky Irving stylistic running back to the backfield. I love Blake Corum, but he's very much a clone of Kyron Williams. It sounds to me that stylistically, McVay wants a thunder and lightning aspect to his backfield where you have your hammer, you have your pass pro guy with a guy like Kyron or a guy like Blake Corum, but you also have a guy that can add juice, get you those chunk 20-plus yard runs, a la what Bucky Irving was able to do for you guys. Because I do think that's, honestly, if you don't have like a Saquon Barkley in your backfield, that is the optimal way to build a backfield. Having a guy that can do the dirty work, like a Rashad, like a Kyron Williams, be good in pass pro, be supplemented some production out of the backfield, but also have the guy that, oh, shoot, he just took a carry from the 45-yard line and scored, and that was maybe a possession on 3rd and 6. We didn't even expect to score points.
Yeah, exactly. I think we talked about Dylan Sampson, Byshell Tootin. Like, there's tons, and even just the receiving backs, the amount of receiving backs late on day 3 or early on day 3 that you can grab, like a Woody Marks or
RJ Harvey,
Trevor Etienne, RJ Harvey. Like, there's a million dudes that would fit the profile of maybe we get a Bucky Irving style role for this player.
So fun fact, I actually saw the Underdog guys talking about this. Shout out both Josh and Hayden, but I saw them mention that I believe Byshell Tootin only had 6 non-wide zone carries in college.
Yeah, he needs to go to
That's a Ram. That's a Ram.
Yeah, or a 49er if they want to address that position or whatever. Yeah, like that scheme is going to love this running back class because I could name 8 to 10 running backs in this class that are going to be perfect fits for that scheme.
Yeah, 100%. And I think we can mention, maybe we talk a little bit about obviously our highest running back in this tier, because I did mention that I have Caleb Johnson at 9, Judkins at 10. So I'll talk about Johnson right now. I think he's going to be a high-end second-round pick. I think some of the main the main teams in contention for his services are probably going to be a team like the Cowboys at 44, just a team that needs a big-bodied power runner that can fill between the tackles. I mean, we saw Caleb Johnson, like we said, his first year handling a huge workload this past year, the level of nuance that he had to his game. Obviously, he kind of needed that aspect to his game to be very strong, considering the fact that he's more of a 4-5-8 type of guy, but he's just so cerebral of a running back. I rarely saw him picking the wrong lane.
Yeah, so I like Caleb Johnson. I tend to think that the Dynasty community likes him more than the NFL does, and I could see him falling to like the 3rd round of the NFL draft, whereas I think Henderson's like over-under will be like 34.5 of where he goes.
I think they're going to go similar range. That's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, I personally don't see that. I think that that Henderson has a lot more buzz in the NFL draft circles than what Caleb has. Again, we're kind of ranking these guys both just on a basis of talent, but also kind of factoring in a little bit where we think they'll go and that kind of thing. So I have Caleb a little bit lower than Henderson, both from a talent perspective and where I think he'll go. So I have him a little bit lower than where you have him, which is why he was in this tier and not in the other tier where you actually had him ranked. As far as like Travion Henderson, I just think that an NFL team is going to understand. They're going to understand and recognize that you can't give this guy 250, 300 carries on the ground because that's just not his game. You need to throw him the football. You need to give him like design touches or plays where he's going to take it to the house or use his speed or whatever the case is. He is a little bit more landing spot dependent than the other top 5 running backs in this class. I think Caleb fits most schemes. Quinshon, Hampton, Genty all fit most schemes. Whereas Henderson, you put him in the right landing spot. Like to me, the 2 best landing spots he could go to are the Chicago Bears at the top of the second round, because then he can basically be a much better version of what DeAndre Swift is, or he goes to the Washington Commanders and fills the Austin Eckler role working alongside Brian Robinson.
Yeah, and I don't know how likely it is, but wouldn't this just be the off-the-board pick? I just talked about Bishal Tootin potentially being a Rams fit, but the off-the-board pick, let's just say the Titans are off the board. There's no wide receiver that they like at 26, and the Rams just said, fuck it, we'll draft Travion Henderson here. Like,
I think there's a chance he goes in round 1, man. Like there's a very good chance that he actually sneaks into the back of 1. And the Chiefs could pick him at 31 as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of teams that could use one of these talented running backs, and very well they should, to be honest. Like this is just such a strong running back class that if you're not drafting a running back this year, like what are you actually doing?
Yeah, and I'll give everyone just a quick 1-sentence take on why every veteran is in this tier. And just tell me if you disagree with anything after I'm done here. Chase Brown is in this tier because he was literally a workhorse down the stretch last year. So that's why he's here. And the Bengals appear to be set with him by signing P. Ryan, not really addressing the position. They have draft picks that they need to spend on defense. Jonathan Taylor is actually nearing the end of his contract sneakily. So it's possible the Colts would add somebody, but he's still Jonathan Taylor. He breaks off big runs. We've seen what he can do, especially in the fantasy playoffs this year. Even if he's a little bit slow starting, he can absolutely bang out a lot of great production. Josh Jacobs, exceptionally good running back.
Workload, touchdown equity.
Exactly. Great offense. James Cook, contract situation would probably, if he got re-signed right now, he'd probably be the head of this tier. But right now we're a little bit concerned. Last year of his rookie deal, Buffalo kind of addressed the position with Ray Davis last year in the draft. Maybe they decide to do that again. We'll have to wait and see, but he's an efficient 55% of the snap type of running back who scored how many touchdowns last year? Everyone was like, oh, he's only scored like 3 touchdowns rushing in his career, and he scored like 18 last year or something like that. So he was excellent on the goal line. Same goes for Kyron. I mean, he's been excellent anytime he gets a workload. We're just worried that they might add somebody, which is why he's lower than usual. Chuba Hubbard is going to be a workhorse next year specifically. Jonathan Brooks, not probably going to play at all. Rico Dowdle was added. That's why he kind of took a little bit of a downtick. And then Christian McCaffrey is Christian McCaffrey. But is Christian McCaffrey healthy Christian McCaffrey right now? Because he's old. He has a lot of touches. But when he's on the field, there is no running back in fantasy that can compete with him. Maybe we get Bijan and Gibbs and Genty and these guys at the top competing with him from a raw point per game perspective. But Christian McCaffrey you could argue he should be at the head of this tier just by how good he is when he's on the field.
It's such a tough one because somebody might be in the comments like, well, why else would they trade Jordan Mason if Christian McCaffrey was not fully healthy at this point? I think there is some merit to that. I also do think that if you're the 49ers trying to get liquid on a running back that you don't expect to be a top 2 running back on your team next year, assuming Garendo takes a step, I think is just a sharp move regardless. Plus, again, we don't also have the information of what happens in the NFL draft because, I mean, we were talking about Bishal Tootin potentially to the Rams. Well, the 49ers are the granddaddy of the wide zone scheme. And if you're telling me Kyle Shanahan sees a 220-pound running back, 215-pound running back, I forgot exactly what Bishal Tootin ended up weighing in at. 211-pound running back running a 4.32 that predominantly played a wide zone scheme in college. I think that could be the wild card of the draft that Josh and Hayden actually have mentioned this before, that they just go out there and select them at 100 overall.
Yeah, he's a lot like Matt Breida, who they loved when they had him, and he would fit that scheme perfectly. So again, I think the Jordan Mason trade is like more pro Garendo than anything, than pro McCaffrey. Again, they obviously believe in McCaffrey. He makes a lot of money, and he's still going to be the engine of their offense whenever he's healthy. Again, McCaffrey, when on the field, is a top 3 to 5 running back in all of fantasy football, but he is old. He has a lot of touches, and his value could plummet at any given moment.
Yeah, no, 100%. But I mean, we can kind of explain the difference between the mid to late first rounder tier versus the early to mid seconds. But obviously, from a pure rookie perspective, you can see that that's just a tier gap in terms of where we have those guys graded. And in terms of the veteran aspect, You can make the case that Derrick Henry and Christian McCaffrey are similar in terms of their projection. The only issue for me is I almost think it's a foregone conclusion that the Ravens will draft a young running back based off the fact that Henry only has one more year, based off the fact that last year Keaton Mitchell didn't really ended up panning out. Justice Hill, do you really want to rely upon him long term? I think they will add another back in this backfield considering how strong this class is. And on top of that, Derrick Henry is a 240-pound running back with how many? 2,500 touches under his belt at this point?
I think that might be a low estimate, but
3,000?
Henry, Keaton, and Justice Hill are all free agents after next year. Like their whole running back core is a free agent after next year. So that's something that could factor in given how good this running back class is. Again, Henry is going to get the workload, especially on the goal line and in the red zone.
Quite a good guess. 2,529 career touches.
Yeah, no, he's got it. He's got a lot of touches under the belt, but Derrick Henry is Derrick Henry. As long as he's playing in the NFL, we're going to stop doubting this guy. Even if he's washed, quote unquote, next year, he'd still punch in 13 touchdowns 100%. And rush for 1,400 yards. So that's where he is. But, he's lower than McCaffrey because he doesn't catch the ball.
Sure, a contending team, and you can get Derrick Henry for an early mid too. I'm perfectly fine with it. Even if he only had one more year left, if he's the RB4 in points per game, RB3 in points per game, you're going to be really happy about that move.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple of these guys, again, we're getting into more shaky territory as far as roles and workloads and things of that nature. Some of the veterans that are in this tier, Kenneth Walker, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I just can't shake the gut feeling that the vibes are off there and that Zach Charbonnet is going to work into this backfield quite a bit more than people think. I know, Kubiak and all these guys are coming out and saying how much they love Kenneth Walker, but Kenneth Walker has had a pretty bad nagging injury history of like groin injuries and oblique stuff and all this kind of shit. So for me with Kenneth Walker, I think you have to rank him cautiously because he is a kind of both as a runner and as an asset, he is very volatile.
Yeah, I mean, there was at one point last year where people were having conversations on Twitter. Is this guy the RB1 rest of the season in fantasy? And then right after that happens, he gets hurt and then never gets that workload again. That's been the Kenneth Walker experience for basically since he's been in the NFL, basically since they've added Zach Charbonnet. With Kenneth Walker, I think he's a good fit for what Clint Kubiak's going to try to do. And I do think he will be the RB1 there. But I actually outlined him in my Dynasty Risers and Fallers video. And I said, by the time the NFL draft kicks off, we're looking at a guy that's probably going to be close to that RB20 range than the majority of the market wants to say, because this guy is young. This guy's been a top 12 to 15 running back. So saying he's the RB20 in Dynasty, some people might be like, how does that make any sense given the age complex and the production that he's seen? But I do have my concerns about the Seahawks offensive projection. I do think their interior offensive line is a mess. I do think going from Geno Smith to Sam Darnold is a downgrade. And if he doesn't have the same type of scoring equity and doesn't see a significant uptick in receiving usage, what exactly is our projection for Kenneth Walker? The RB16 in fantasy this year? If he's the RB16 in fantasy and he's going to be 25 years old, I would rather re-roll on some younger running backs at that point.
Yeah, I think many Kenneth Walker defenders would argue that, he was like a top 8 to 10 running back when he was healthy this year. He just needs to stay healthy. And again, we're not going to be in the business of saying he's injury prone and he can't, stay on the field or whatever, but it has been true of recent. So he's in a contract year too. And sometimes in contract years, people play through shit and they're able to, maybe gut out a 17-game season and then find a big payday. We'll see what happens with Kenneth Walker. Again, I'm kind of ranking him up, like cautiously optimistic that I think, he could still be the same Kenneth Walker he's always been, where for some reason he goes in like the 5th, 6th round of fantasy drafts and redraft season. And then whoever by week 6, people are like, I have a top 6 running back. I feel like for the last 3 years, people have gotten a value on Kenneth Walker by week 7, week 8 of the regular season, but then the wheels fall off.
There's always a sell
He's
high
like the
window.
Kyler Murray of running backs.
There's always a sell high window on Kenneth Walker. Like if you sold him, so I'm looking through his game logs. Obviously he missed. So he played in week 1, had a good game against Denver, missed week 2 and week 3, returned into week 4 against Detroit. And if you remember that game, I believe that was the Monday Night Football game. Points were being scored in galore. Walker broke off like a 40-yard touchdown, if I'm not mistaken. Like that game was absolutely ludicrous. And if you just took his week 4 to week 9 prior to him getting that bye week, man, like 33.6, 14.6, 20.9, 23.3, 8.5, that was legitimate mid to high end RB1 level production. The issue though is once he got hurt and Charbonnet showed that he can contribute to the backfield, we saw the previous regime rely upon a split backfield. Now, I don't know what this new regime will think, obviously with Clint Kubiak coming in. I just have my hesitancy because I do think the offense as a whole is going to be worse.
Yeah, and I feel like when your gut's telling you, hey, maybe this guy isn't a workhorse, it usually is the case. Just because the NFL doesn't like to give workhorse roles to people. Like there's 3 to 5 running backs every year that actually get workhorse roles. So that's my hesitancy with Kenneth Walker. Joe Mixon is obviously a little bit concerning based on how he closed out the season, but he's going to get the work. He always, similar to Kenneth Walker, starts the season out very, very strong. So that gives you sell high windows if you want to use that production, so on and so forth. I expect them to add somebody to the backfield in Houston at some point during the draft, probably like 3rd, 4th round. They'll add somebody. But we'll have to kind of wait and see what happens there. David Montgomery is David Montgomery. We know exactly what his role is. He's going to be on the field. Ben Johnson leaving probably impacts him. So that's why he maybe takes a down tick in some people's minds. And then the other veterans in this area, we have Alvin Kamara, who is still under contract with the Saints. I expect him to still have like 140 dump offs this year, as he usually does. And Najee Harris now joins this tier because he signed with the Chargers. Now, we don't know what the Chargers are going to do in the draft. I think this takes them out of taking a 1st round running back. Like I can't imagine they would take Hampton now, but we'll have to wait and see where they address the position because it probably will happen at some point. But if Najee gets a 4th round running back added to his backfield, let's say it's Woody Marks in the 4th round or something, it's probably not going to affect his bottom line nearly as much as Quinshon Judkins in the 2nd round would.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment too. We do have to keep in mind too with the Najee deal, it is a 1-year term. It is, I believe, the base minimum of 6.1, 6.2 million. It could work up to 9.5. So there is incentives written in there to the point where they're almost incentivized to bring in a 2nd running back to try to keep that cost down. Because I mean, Najee, regardless, like obviously he's going to play his role. He's probably going to take 200 carries. He's probably going to be that physical goal line back, like a Gus Edwards was with this team last year. Like that's kind of how I envision it. Can he take on like a Gus Edwards plus role for this team? And they get a guy to supplement the J.K. Dobbins role of those space touches with maybe a guy that's even more adept in the passing game.
Yeah, I think like Trevor Etienne in the 4th round makes like total sense for this team.
Dylan Sampson.
Yeah, Sampson and Tootin and all these guys. We'll talk about them in a second. But anybody who really gives you a lot of space production or, breakaway playability, because Najee is going to play 17 games. He always does. And he's going to be a stable force 3.9 yards
back
per carry.
Blue collar back, baby. He packs his lunch every morning. He goes to work, gets home on time, makes dinner sits with the kids and the wife, eats dinner with exactly what you're going to get on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes you're going to love it. Sometimes you're not going to love it as much, but you can't say he didn't meet your expectation.
You know, the paintings of like guys on like 1930s skyscrapers that are like hanging on a beam, just eating their lunch pail.
Yeah.
Like that's not like, just put Najee Harris in that picture. That's basically where he would be.
No nonsense.
Exactly. Tracy's the other guy in this tier who's probably at most risk of getting a guy added to his backfield just because he was kind of a luxury for the Giants last year.
He could be up in the next year if they don't, though.
Yeah, if Tracy escapes this draft and all they add is a 6th round running back or something like that, and there's not really anybody in free agency that gets added or whatever, like, dude, Tracy was good last year, man. He was a consistent RB2 in our rankings, good matchups. He was a low-end RB1 in our rankings, like, and the Giants presumably, hopefully, at some point will address the quarterback position. We don't really know what's going on there. Are they going to trade up for Cam Ward? Are they going to draft, a 2nd round quarterback? Are they going to sign Aaron Rodgers, who's still out there? Are they going to sign? My guess would be that they like probably sign Russell Wilson and like draft a Jackson Dart at the end of the 1st round, early 2nd round or something. But we'll have to wait and see what happens with Tyrone Tracy. As of now, he's the starting running back. But if you have him, he's only worth about an early to mid-second because you can't simply pay 1st round draft capital for a guy who could get nuked by Quinshon Judkins or Hampton or one of those guys at the top of the 2nd round.
Gone are the days where you could trade Dameon Pierce for like unconditional 1st round picks, or maybe
James Robinson, Tyler Algier, Michael Carter, Dameon Pierce. We've had a million guys like this with low draft capital, and Tracy even lower than some of those guys.
I think Tracy's better than all those guys for what it's worth, but it has been shown with the NFL that if you don't have significant draft capital invested into you, especially in a really, really strong 2025 class, if the Giants are tempted in adding a backfield mate at the very minimum, they will.
Yeah, and like there's obviously stories of like Kyron Williams, who was a 5th round pick who escaped, kind of quote unquote escaped like a significant addition, but even he had a 3rd round running back added last year in Blake Corum, and it affected his value. So Tracy's an interesting one. Definitely could go up in value if he gets off scot-free in the NFL draft, but also could go way down in value. So he's a little bit of a volatile asset as well. Tootin, Scadaboo, and Sampson are the rookies in this tier. With all of them, we're kind of ranking them a little bit cautiously because we love the talent of all three of these guys. And I think Scadaboo specifically is probably the safest from a draft capital standpoint. I think he's probably guaranteed to go in the second or the third round of the NFL draft.
It sounds like, based off what the NFL media has been saying, that NFL teams really like Dylan Sampson as well. Because I've noticed specifically from an NFL media perspective, Sampson is usually regarded higher than we've seen even in the Dynasty community. Like, I thought I was high on him. I have him at RB6 overall. I've seen people that have him legitimately in their top 4 overall, top 5.
Yeah,
overall.
Zerline has him 3, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. So,
yeah. Yeah, all these guys they're gonna have value. We just can't really rank them any higher than this until we had like consistent. Like if we knew like foregone conclusion, Scadaboo was getting mocked like top 50 every single NFL draft, NFL mock draft that we watch. I would probably put Scadaboo at least at the head of this tier, if not maybe even into the tier ahead, just given that kind of draft capital investment and the receiving traits that he has and that kind of thing. But we do have to factor in, hey, what if these guys fall to like the 4th round or something like that? So that's why they're not ranked nearly as high. But again, this is a pre-draft version of this. Once we have post-draft landing spots and draft capital, we'll be able to rank these guys a lot more accurately. We're kind of just factoring in that, yeah, it's a foregone conclusion. Caleb Johnson and above running backs are probably going at least in the top 75 picks, if not the top 50 to 64 picks of the NFL draft. Whereas Tootin, Scadaboo, Sampson, any other rookie running backs in that 3rd tier that you like, Devin Neal, Ollie Gordon, who we'll talk about in a second, Damian Martinez, like all those guys, whoever gets the best draft capital and landing spot is realistically going to be the head of that tier.
Yeah, I agree with that. Is there anybody that we haven't touched upon? I mean, it's pretty basic that the Kamara, the Montgomery, the Mixon, and the Derrick Henry specifically will make up the veterans that we expect production from year one. The other guys kind of, the younger backs, obviously the guys with maybe some more upside mixed in there as well. But we do see the mid to late seconds here. Basically, I would say similar vet projections, only maybe 85% of or 90% of the next year above them. And then, of course, the other rookies that we don't view on the same tier personally as Sampson, Tootin, and Scadaboo.
Yeah, the veterans are weird in this tier because you either have guys that are in split backfields who maybe are going to be the starters, or they're young enough that even if they're not the starter this year, they could be the starter next year. Like, to me, Charbonnet and Bigsby are the poster child for that. Even if they're not the starter this year, I expect them to be the starter the following year, because I don't think ETN will stick around very long in Jacksonville. And I don't think Kenneth Walker will probably get a big contract from Seattle, and he'll probably hit like free agency or something. So those guys are weird. It's like you're projecting maybe they like, the reason I actually like taking players like this in startups is like, what do you have to spend on Charbonnet and Bigsby in a startup? Like a 10th round pick, an 11th round pick, something like that. If you go with like a 0 RB build and you have 5 receivers, 3 quarterbacks, an elite tight end, maybe a stud running back already, and you fill out your running back core with Tank Bigsby and Tajay Spears and a bunch of dudes like that, there's a good chance you're going to get a guy who's like an RB2 or better production wise during the season, who's still young. And that's why I like Tank Bigsby. And if it were up to me, Tajay Spears would probably be in this tier as well. So those guys are the interesting ones. And same goes for even Jaylen Warren, Brian Robinson, and Ramondre Stevenson. As of this moment, this very second, you can project pretty well for Ramondre Stevenson. You can project pretty well for Jaylen Warren or for Brian Robinson, but they are definitely at risk of having significant competition added in the NFL draft. That's the worry with those guys. If one of them dodges it, they're going to probably be in great shape. Like, if Jaylen Warren has nobody really added to the NFL draft backfield, it's a 6th round banger running back like Kyle Manangai or something like that, where does Jaylen Warren go in redraft next year?
Round 5 or 6?
Yeah, probably. Like, Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. They have DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the outside, and Jaylen Warren is clearly the starting running back there. Like, it's possible that we're way too low on him right now, but we have to factor in that he was literally a UDFA, got an RFA tender. It was a good tender. It was a 2nd round tender, I believe. But they could still very well draft Ollie Gordon in the 3rd round or Damian Martinez in the 4th round or something like that.
Yep, agree with that. And then, I mean, Tank Bigsby, people might be asking where's Travis Etienne. We do believe that the tide has shifted in Jacksonville. Tank Bigsby, frankly, just looked like the much better back this past year. And Liam Cohn has shown when Rachaad White was fumbling, Rachaad White got benched. We saw Liam Cohn, first and foremost, prioritize accountability. And the thing that I have a question mark with Travis Etienne is his accountability. because we see multiple mental mistakes from him on a game-to-game basis at this point, which I did not think we would be saying about him at this point in his career.
Yeah, I think these like mistake prone running backs like really, really fall out of favor quickly with NFL teams. Think about
Yeah.
where Stevenson is at right now as well. Think about Antonio Gibson before he fell out of favor in Washington. Those guys, ironically, Stevenson's teammate. It's weird that we don't kind of see it ahead of time as fantasy players. But the first thing when I remember, because I'm a Bucs fan, I watched Liam Cohen's first introductory press conference all the way to any time he spoke behind a mic. Every time he talked about the running back position, all he cared about was decisive running backs, decisiveness. It was always what he said about the running back position. And when Tank Bigsby got the football last year, he was downhill quickly. That was his running style. That's how he runs the ball. We said, because I love Tank Bigsby coming out of 2023 class. He was my RB4 in that class. He was going to need a little bit of time to learn how to run decisively in the NFL. And he learned that pretty quickly within like a calendar year. He was also really young when he came into the NFL. I think he was only 20 years old on the night of the draft in 2023. So he
still only 22.
He's really young, man. Cam Scatterbo is older than Tank Bigsby. Like there's guys in this class that are older than Tank Bigsby. So I feel actually really, really good about him as somebody that I would spend a startup draft pick on, or I would throw a mid-second at somebody for Tank Bigsby right now, because I think he's on the rise and ETN seems to be falling out of favor. And maybe it's a Rashad White, Bucky Irving situation where ETN starts the year as the starter or whatever the case is. But I just think knowing what I know about Liam Cohen, he's going to prefer Bigsby.
Yeah, so it's funny you mentioned that. Let me throw something at you that's gonna completely blow your mind. Tyrone Tracy is 3 years older than Tank Bigsby.
Yeah, well, Tracy was like 24 coming out of the draft.
No, I know, but it's funny because Bigsby's been in the league longer.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Like if you look at Bigsby, he's only 23.6 years old. Cam Scatterbo was born the same year as Tank Bigsby. Trey Benson and like some of the guys that you probably assume are way younger than Tank Bigsby are basically the same age. RJ Harvey, same age as Tank Bigsby. Kyle Menengai, also in this draft class, same age as Tank Bigsby. There's a ton of dudes that have been in the league for a couple of years that we just forget how young they were coming out. Like it happens a lot.
Sorry, 2 years older. My bad. I said 3 by accident. But
yeah,
regardless,
it's insane though. It's insane how young Bigsby is, and I really do think by mid-season next year he could be like the breakout back-end RB1 of this offense. And we both believe in the Jacksonville offense, which is why we're excited about Tank Bigsby. And again, maybe we're too low on ETN, but I'm starting to just get bad vibes about ETN. He didn't look good. If you want to say, oh, he's the breakaway guy, it's like, well, Bigsby had more breakaway runs than him on way less carries. So like he's not really bringing a whole lot to the table right now, and he hasn't really been consistent as a receiver, even though he probably should have been a lot better than he is right now based on his receiving profile coming out of college.
Yeah, and the biggest question mark that people might have is, well, Tank Bigsby, despite being the more efficient runner, only garnered 12 targets in 16 games played last year. And I do think that's a concern that his receiving volume was low. But I also do think this is a rookie running back that averaged 2.64 yards per carry, that by year 2 upped that to 4.56. If he improved that aspect of his game so rapidly, there's a very real possibility that he starts improving as a receiving threat.
Yeah, we're talking about a guy who's a 5-star high school recruit too. Like he was a talented player in college, and he just got kind of in a shit end of the stick with Auburn there for a couple of years. So Bigsby, I guess if you're taking away anything from this, I think I talked about him as a buy in the Dynasty trade targets by position a couple weeks back, but definitely an interesting player here. Yeah, Connor and Aaron Jones, both of those guys are just good redraft projections, maybe slightly worse redraft projections than the next tier up of Alvin Kamara and Derrick Henry. Like maybe one question somebody might have right now is, why is David Montgomery in the next tier, but why isn't Aaron Jones there? Because I think you could make the argument potentially that Aaron Jones is a better redraft projection than David Montgomery. I think it's probably true that he is.
Yeah, I would say it's probably just the tetherment to the Detroit Lions is kind of where I'm at with it.
In the reliability maybe of David Montgomery to stay on the field and like be a consistent guy too.
Yeah, it also feels like the dynasty market likes David Montgomery more than it does Aaron Jones. On top of that, like I said, technically speaking, it was a 2-year extension from Aaron Jones, but I do believe that the Vikings have an out after year 1, which if they don't have an out after year 1 on a 30-year-old running back, I don't know what they're doing, but I believe there is an out on year 1, but you guys can correct me in the comments. I can actually check that right now.
Yeah, and the Vikings could still add running backs in the draft. They have a late 3rd round pick. They might trade down in the 1st round, collect more picks, so on and so forth. So Damian Martinez and Ollie Gordon, the only guys that we haven't really talked about in this tier, they're both tail end top 10 rookie running backs for us. Again, both of them, I'd be worried if they go day 2 or not. Especially Gordon didn't really test well. Damian Martinez did, but people don't seem to be super high on him from an NFL draft standpoint. I guess the real reality of this is whoever of Gordon, Martinez, Devin Neal, Raheem Sanders, Taj Brooks, we could name 15 running backs right now, goes the highest to the best landing spot would be kind of in this range.
So it's funny with Martinez specifically because I was going to say, oh, I don't know when I ended up higher than you on him because technically I have him RB9 versus RB10. But then I looked at it, I have him RB9, you have him 10, but you also just have a higher grade on him. So it just kind of goes to show you that like you've kind of made those grades a little bit higher than me respectively on the running backs.
Yeah, I like that territory of running back, to be honest. I like the Devin Neals, Gordon, Martinez, Raheem Sanders.
Good territory.
Yeah, it's a good territory of dart throws in the mid to late second round, early third round of rookie drafts. So that's kind of where those guys ended up for me. But yeah, this was our top 36 running back rankings in Dynasty right now, including rookies. Again, any other rookies that get good draft capital and landing spot, don't be like, where is Trevor Etienne? He should be in here. It's like, well, we don't really expect him to go on day 2. So that's why he's not in this range. Let us know what you think in the comments. I feel like Kenneth Walker might be a little contentious of a topic, but hopefully you go back and listen to what we said about Kenneth Walker and kind of where our head's at with him. But yeah, let us know what you guys think in the comments. If you want all of our Dynasty rankings, wide receivers, running backs, quarterbacks, tight ends, all those up to date with rookie picks included on the site, flockfantasy.com. Promo code FSE to sign up for a 7-day free trial. You can also get team reviews from us, 6 to 10 minutes. We'll break down your team just like we do on Dynasty Decisions episodes. You can get buy, sell, hold reports from us, which help you kind of guide your trade strategy, and a ton of other stuff over there. Rookie Draft Guide version 2 will be dropping April 1st with prospect model stuff, pro day, combine updates, and also 30 plus more prospects added to the guide for a total of like 60 to 65 dudes to help you guys get ready for your rookie draft. So we have player cards, we have write-ups, we have everything. You'll need to know everything about these prospects. So if that interests you, check it out down below. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.